If you were following my Star Wars journey during 2025, then you know that I very audaciously made the goal to complete every canon Star Wars novel within the year. And when I spoke that out loud, I honestly didn't think that I was going to do it because I don't read. Or up until last year, I had read 12 to 14 books a year, and that is a very recent occurrence. I didn't read at all, like in high school or pre-high school. I was not a reader. I've never been a reader. And for some reason this year, I decided to fully lock in and read over 200 books in 2025, which I promise will never happen again. At least I can't imagine that ever happening again. Looking back on it, I am both very proud of myself and appalled at the audacity that I had to share that goal on the internet that I knew full well probably would not have happened. But partially because I was sharing that adventure with you guys, and partially because I am extremely stubborn and don't want to look like a fool on the internet, I forced myself to read all 100 plus books. Even if I wasn't enjoying them in the moment, even if they weren't good, I powered through all of them. And now I'm here to make that mistake for a second time. I have had this beautiful, grand idea in my head of going through all of Star Wars in chronological order, start to finish. When I started reading The High Republic last year, that's kind of what I was intending to do, but then I got sidetracked with like the book wheel stuff, and then I was like, why am I doing the book wheel if I'm also doing this? Don't want to be rereading things over and over again. It just got very muddled. So we put that off to the side. Now that I've read all these books already, and now that I've seen all the movies, and I've seen all the shows, and I've seen all the animated stuff, obviously, I feel like 2026 might be the year to do this. So, welcome to the first episode of my journey to chronologically read, watch, experience all of the current Star Wars canon during the year 2026. Here's what we're going to do. At least here's what I'm hoping to do. I'm going to start with phase 2 of the High Republic because chronologically that starts before phase 1, and we're just going to go for it. Everything. We're going to go through it top to bottom. I might throw some legend stuff in there. I kind of want to reread Plagueis when the time is right. Almost want to do the Bane trilogy, but I know that starts like way earlier than the High Republic stuff, so I don't know if I want to start with that necessarily. I will also be throwing a couple of the games in there, specifically both Cal games, Outlaws, and maybe Battlefront 2, the story mode. I've never played that before, and I'm kind of interested to see what that's about. And maybe also Squadrons if I'm feeling ambitious, but don't hold me to that because I feel like that game is going to make me so violently ill. My goal for this, extremely delusionally, is to be at the point of The Mandalorian Season 3 when The Mandalorian and Grogu comes out this May. Do I think I'm actually going to hit that mark? I do not know. There is a ton of stuff before The Mandalorian. Who knows? My womanly audacity is telling me that that is completely doable. We'll see. This video was mostly just a primer so you guys know what I'm up to this year if you see me talking randomly about Star Wars books that you know I've already read. And also to kind of get feelers out to see what kind of content you guys want to see around this. Do you want to see more long form stuff? Do you want little blurbs like this, just sharing random thoughts? Written stuff I've also considered if you're more of a blog person. I would genuinely love to hear your thoughts and see what you guys want to see from me in this coming year. That being said, I am still doing the book club. We're going to be doing new releases. I am honestly really excited to start this. This is something that I've wanted to do for the past couple years, but have just been really daunted by it. Is that a word? But after proving to myself that I could do all of this in a year, I feel like, I don't know, let's do something crazy. Crazier than reading 210 books in a year. Jeez. I also want to take the end of this video to say how thankful I am for you guys. I know that I say it quite often, but I really do want to keep saying it and letting you guys know that I appreciate you so much. I would not be sitting here and doing this if you were not here and if you guys were not like engaging with my stuff. It really does mean the world to me. I love making videos and editing and doing all this crunchy stuff. So the fact that literally anyone is interested in hearing me ramble like a crazy person about Star Wars of all things just feels so fun and something that I would have literally never thought was, I don't know, something that I would be doing right now in my big age. But I really do appreciate you guys, whether this is the first video you're seeing of me or if you've been here since I started this channel back in, I think 2023, December 2023 precisely. I'm just so grateful for you guys. I hope that you guys are excited for 2026. I hope that your year is amazing, and I am just so excited to share it with you. If you want to follow along on this journey, make sure you press the follow button. I, of course, would love to have you here and have your thoughts as I go through this trial. And I mean, I guess I'll see you tomorrow for what might be our first review. I'm just so excited for this. One of the wisest Jedi Masters once said, "Do or do not, there is no try." And that's why in 2026 we are not attempting, we are doing a full canon experience for Star Wars currently. That means we are reading all of the canon books, we are going through all of the movies, all of the series, live action and animated. We are also going to be playing some of the games. To start us off on this journey, there was only one place to begin, and that, of course, is with Path of Deceit, the first book of the High Republic Phase 2, which chronologically happens before Phase 1. This book, to me, is the perfect starting point, mostly because it is crossing off two sub-goals of mine for this year, one of which was to reread the entirety of the High Republic because I finished it in the middle of last year and it's not fresh in my mind anymore and I want to experience it again. And second is to reread some of my favorite books that I went through last year, and this was definitely on that list. This, for me, I believe was a 5-star when I read it for the first time, and I think honestly that might have held up. If not, this is definitely firmly in the 4.5 to 4.75 range. I'm going to try to stay off the spoilers here, but if you want to avoid any information whatsoever for this book, make sure you save this video and come back once you have completed it, because I would love to hear your thoughts on not only this book, but the entirety of Phase 2 of the High Republic. This book sets up what the main situation is going to be for Phase 2, and ultimately also Phase 1, but we are definitely not even close to being there yet, so let's just ignore it for right now. This book follows mainly Padawan Kevmo Zink, Marta Rowe, who is part of the Path of the Open Hand, which is a Force cult, and this woman in the middle here, Elysia, also known as the Mother, who is the head of the Path. Through this book, we see that the Path is up to a little bit of some shady business, and Kevmo, along with his master, go to Dalna, the planet they're on, to investigate. Not necessarily investigate the Path, but investigate what we know the Path has done. They just don't know that yet. Through this book, we learn a lot about Kevmo and Marta separately and together. We see them develop a relationship and watch what that ultimately turns into, which is just them agreeing to be friends, because Kevmo, of course, is a Jedi, and they can't have attachments like that, much to Marta's chagrin. And of course, characters like Marta Rowe are so integral to the High Republic, not only in Phase 2, but also with Phase 1 and Phase 3, if you remember the name of the main antagonist from those two. This book was co-written by Tessa Gratton and Justina Ireland, two writers that you will see a lot within Star Wars books in general, and with Justina Ireland, she wrote a ton for the High Republic. I think by far this is one of Justina Ireland's best books in the High Republic, and as for Tessa Gratton, she's one of my favorite Star Wars authors. She wrote The Crystal Crown. She co-wrote, I believe, one other High Republic book. She also wrote Temptation of the Force, all of which I think were really, really well done. And this book really is no different. Part of the reason why I love this book so much and why it continues to be one of my highest ranked books, not only in the High Republic, but in the Star Wars book sphere as a whole, is because it doesn't feel like I am being bombarded with information. And now I have to give my big caveat here. If you have not read this book before, and you ignored my spoiler warning, but you are looking to start the High Republic, I don't think that you should start with Phase 2. There is a joy to reading and experiencing Star Wars chronologically that I know vaguely because I have attempted to do this before, just with like movies and shows. However, you will enjoy this book so much more when you have the context from Phase 1. There are so many little nods in this book to what happens in Phase 1, and I think that getting a break between the drastic conclusion of Phase 1 and Phase 3, where you are looking to pick back up on that conclusion and see what happens, this is a very, not necessarily welcomed, because I remember dreading it when I picked it up for the first time. You will feel so much more gratified after completing phase 2 going into phase 3. Or at the very least, I was. For this series, I will not be giving number ratings, rather I think I'm going to be doing a tier list, and I am not sure where this one lies yet. I have to think about it a little bit more. I am doing this with my siblings, so I think we'll kind of crowdsource this. At the moment, this is either at the top of A tier or like an A plus tier or S tier for me. But as I go through more of this and have something to compare this to, I will settle on a rating for this. If you want to follow along on my chronological Star Wars journey, make sure you press the follow button. I will be posting these videos as frequently as humanly possible as I go through all of the books, all the movies, all the series, and some of the games. And of course, in between those videos, I have a ton of other content planned for this year that I would love for you to see, so make sure you press follow if you like the vibes here. As always, I want to thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate you so drastically. You have absolutely no idea. And as always, I will see you tomorrow. Bye. One of the greatest Jedi Masters once famously said, "Do or do not, there is no try," and that's why in 2026 I am not trying to go through the entire Star Wars chronology. I'm going to do it. If you missed the first episode of this, I am going through all of the movies, all the series, all of the books, a little tiny bit of the comics, and as many of the games as I can get my hands on, and we're trying to do it all within a year. Is that something that's doable? I don't know. We're gonna find out. And lucky for you, you're joining at the perfect time because we are only on our second installment. That, of course, being Quest for the Hidden City by George Mann, the second book in the High Republic Phase 2, because, of course, chronologically, it takes place before Phase 1. This book has a fairly large cast of characters, but we are mostly following this Padawan right here, whose name is Rupert, and this kid whose name is Das, or Das. I'm gonna give a little tiny spoiler warning here, but I'll be honest, I don't feel like I need to get into the plot of this book too much, because it doesn't really do anything groundbreaking. Everything in this book we're either going to experience later in one of the young adult or adult novels, or it literally never shows up again. So as much as I found that this book was enjoyable to read, it's not overly consequential. So to give the biggest TLDR I've probably ever given, we follow Rupert and Salandra as they go to Abu Das. They meet up with some of the locals there who are like, "Oop, we actually need to go to Gloam." They go to Gloam, they find Das and their father Spence, and then Das and Spence share that they were trapped on Gloam by Sunshine Dobbs, who they had originally teamed up with as fellow prospectors to go and look for the mysterious Planet X, because if they found it, they were going to be rich. So obviously Sunshine did not want to play around with them and left them on Gloam once he figured he could do whatever he needed to do on his own. The group of 4 team up with their Catacoot guide, the Catacoot being the natives from Abu Das, who's basically feeding them the plot as we go. They find the missing Jedi that they were looking for. They figure out what's up with the monsters that have been terrorizing Das and their father, and the plot gets wrapped up in a really nice little bow, with Rupert and her master dropping off Das and their father onto Batu. It's our second Batu mention thus far. And they learn that the war between Irem and Arano is over, and that is going to lead us very nicely into the next book, one of my absolute favorites that I cannot wait to talk to you guys about. When I read this book for the first time last year, I remember being kind of annoyed with it because I loved Path of Vengeance so much, and this book has basically nothing to do with Path of Vengeance besides the mention of Sunshine. And if I'm being honest, I was kind of miffed about that because I just wanted to know more about Marta. I wanted to see what her and Yana were doing. I just needed more of that. And the fact that we don't get a single mention in here about the path or the mother or the leveler is just kind of annoying to me. The first time I read this book, I think I was being a little bit harsh with it. Going back and listening to the audiobook for the first time, which I highly recommend, and also just going into it with the mindset that it is what it is and it's not a continuation of Path of Vengeance, did really change my mind on this book. Originally, I think I gave it a 2.25 or a 2.5, a 2.75, somewhere around there. I ended up giving it, I think, a 3.75 or a 3.5. It's not a bad book by any stretch of the imagination. For what it is, being a middle grades book written for middle grades readers, I think this book is really well done. I really like George Mann's writing just in general, and I think that he did a really good job with this one, and it is really fun to listen to. Good, easy read. It is super small. It's not giving you anything that needs a lot of brain power to deduct. You're basically given a problem and then it's almost immediately solved. As far as the chronology-wide ranking goes, I think I'm going to give this one a C tier. Again, not because it's bad, but because I know that there are going to be plenty of things that I like more than this. It's not worthy of anything below a C, so I think a C is where it should end up. The next book that we are reading is one that I am so excited to get to again. It is Convergence by Zoraida Córdova. Not only do I love her writing, I know for a fact that I love this book. I was obsessed with it when I first read it, and I cannot wait to get back in there. Some of my favorite characters and some of my favorite Star Wars concepts, specifically being the war between Iroh and Arano, are introduced in that book. If you want to be here for that discussion, definitely press follow. I am making these videos as fast as humanly possible as I try to bulldoze my way through this chronology. I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for humoring me while I try to do this very silly thing. As always, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye. Yoda once said, do or do not, there is no try, and that's why in 2026 I am not trying to get through the entirety of the Star Wars chronology. I'm going to do it. If this is the first time you're seeing me, my name is Sunny, and I'm trying to get through as many of these Star Wars books, comics, TV shows, movies, games that I possibly can in the year 2026. Today, we are on I believe this is the 4th installment, and it is our first comic. We are going to be talking about The Blade, which is a part of the High Republic Phase 2, because of course, chronologically, that comes before Phase 1. Super quick spoiler warning for this. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but if you want to avoid any information for this whatsoever, definitely save this video and come back when you're done. I would love to hear your thoughts, but I also don't want you to be spoiled for this because it was really good. Now, this was written by Charles Soule, who has written a couple of the Star Wars books, and I do generally like his writing, but I've noticed just through other comics that I've read from him, I do generally like his work with the comics more than I like his straight up books. And that definitely held true for this one as well. This book is so fun. It's only 4 issues, so if you have not picked this up already and you're a fan of the High Republic, this is immaculate. I just want to show you the first page of this because I was hooked literally immediately. This is Porter Ingle. If you are not already obsessed with him, get ready to be through this book. He is just such a fun and intriguing character. We mostly see him in phases 1 and especially in phase 3. He's super prevalent, and he was one of my favorite characters when I was going through those for the first time. So being able to see him here in phase 2 was really a treat. We got a ton of backstory for him, and we got to see the relationship between him and his sister, who I learned through this isn't his blood sister, it is his sister by friendship, I guess. Like, it's a chosen sibling relationship, and I can't remember if that was ever stated in the books or not. It might have, and I just don't remember it, but getting to see their relationship develop here. There are a couple flashbacks where we get to see them as children and then watch them grow up a little bit. It was just really fun and engaging. The story is simple. You're just kind of following along as they go on a mission together. It is, I feel like, mostly character building for both Porter and his sister. It was just a fun time. It wasn't too long. I was able to blast through it in like less than an hour. I feel bad ending the video here, but there's not really a ton I can say about this without just going through the entirety of the plot, which I don't want to do because I do feel like you should go read this if you have access to it. This book for me was just proving that Porter is a cool character and that his backstory was worth exploring, and I think in that it did a really good job. I think the writing was great, the art was really great. I'm pretty picky about the type of art I like in comics, and I think this one was perfectly comicsy without being overly gross or overly cartoony, which is kind of my line. Yeah, I just had a good time with it. Kind of a boring review, but I honestly don't have a lot to say about this besides the fact that it was fun. To give a ranking for this one, I'm not sure where I'm going to put it yet. I want to put it in A, but it was so short, and I know that there is a continuation of this story, but because it was so short, we didn't have a lot of time with anyone in particular. So I feel like we could have maybe made it a little bit longer, but I liked it so much, it probably is going in A tier. That is all I have for this one. Sorry, it was a bit short. I feel like these reviews going forward for the comics are just going to end up being shorter because they're either going to be one-off comics or they're going to be really short for the most part. So Expect some of these shorter, lighter videos, but if anything, that's a good thing because it means I can get them out quicker. If you want to follow along for the rest of this journey, I am trying to put these out as quickly as I possibly can. We do have a lot of books front-loaded, which is why it's going to take a little bit longer, but once we get into the series and the movies, we're going to start blasting through these, so definitely make sure you press follow if you want to stay up to date with this. And I also post a bunch of other Star Wars stuff. If you liked the vibes here, you might like some of my other stuff too, who knows. I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you for humoring me and allowing me to do this very silly thing, and as always, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye. One of the teeny tiniest Jedi Masters once said, "Do or do not, there is no try," which is why in 2026 I am not trying to go through the entire Star Wars chronology, I'm going to do it. If you're new here, my name is Sunny. I'm trying to get through as many of the Star Wars books, comics, TV shows, games, series, I think I listed all of the mediums, as I possibly can in this year. Today we are still discussing the High Republic Phase 2, which of course chronologically comes before Phase 1, and I have the absolute pleasure of talking to you about one of my all-time favorite books in Star Wars, Convergence by Zoraida Córdova. Before we go any further, I need you to save this video and come back when you're done if you have not read this book. I would genuinely love to hear your thoughts on it, but I do not want to be the one that gives you spoilers because I truly feel like you need to go into this spoiler-free. This book picks up exactly where we left off with the quest for the hidden city, with the war ending between Irem and Arano. Now, these two planets have been at war forever. They literally refer to this war as the Forever War. It's very Sharks and Jet in the way that people from Irem don't like people from Arano don't like people from Irem. Part of the plot of this book follows the Prince of Arano and the Princess of Irem, Ziri and Fontu, as they decide to unite their planets to end the war through a marriage. That is where our other two characters come in, one of which being Gelanatai, the Jedi Knight on the cover of the book, the other of which being the proclaimed Prince of Coruscant, Axel Greylark, who is the son of the current Chancellor. Axel's a bit of a bad boy, he's a charmer, he likes to drink, he likes to gamble, he likes to sleep around. He's kind of that archetypal, slimy, charming that does really well in media but terrible in real life. If Axel Greylark was a real person, I would not get anywhere near him, but because he's in a book, I can appreciate his flaws. So after a failed assassination attempt on the Prince and Princess, Gela and Axel are tasked with protecting them as they try to figure out who did the assassination attempt, what's going on. And that's all I'm really going to say about the plot of this book because I don't want to say any more information in case anyone did not heed my spoiler warning. What we can discuss though is how strong and deep my love is for this novel. First, the writing is just so spectacular. Zoraida Córdova has not written a ton of Star Wars books. This one and A Crash of Fate, I believe, might be her only two, but I adore both of them. They are definitely in my top 10 favorite Star Wars books, which I think says a lot since I have read all of them. The way that she writes connections, not only romantic connections, but relationships between parents and children, relationships between friends, relationships between people who have a mutual respect for one another but don't like one another. She's able to put so much nuance into these characters who we're meeting for the first time in this story. And by the end of the book, this isn't a very long book, but by the time you're done, you feel so connected to these people. I think that is one of the hallmarks of a truly great author, when you feel so deeply connected to the characters and to the plot and to the situation that this book leaves off with, even though you only had 8-ish hours with them. Speaking of the 8 hours I spent with this book, Mark Thompson is the audiobook narrator. If you are also listening through the chronology, this is the first book that you will experience from Mark Thompson, and I just have to say, every single time I listen to one of his narrations, I am blown away. You can really tell that Mark Thompson enjoys what he's doing. You can just feel how much heart he's putting into these stories. It's why he's one of the best, and anytime that he narrates a Star Wars book, it is such a treat. The last thing I wanted to talk about here was how masterfully this book sets up the rest of Phase 2. I love how subtle this book is with setting up the rest of the plot. We get a little bit more about about the mother and the path through Axel's story. We get to see a little bit more of what the Jedi are doing in this phase through Gela. We get the Iron and Arano stuff, which of course is a huge part of this book, but will be affecting the remainder of not only this phase, but going into phase 1. And I was reading this book, I wasn't really thinking about what was going to be happening in the future. And with the previous 2 books I've read, that was definitely at the forefront of my mind. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's just something I noticed while I was reading, especially when I was reading Path of Vengeance. I was constantly trying to draw up what happened to these characters, where did this plot point go, what can I remember about what's coming. And that is partially because that book is so consequential to the rest of the story, but I think it's also because so many little things were constantly being dropped and then left. It felt a little bit like I needed to start collecting all of these Easter eggs. With Convergence, I feel like it was a little bit more subtle with how it was dropping hints and leaving things for the reader to pick up on and call back to later. And I really, really, really appreciated that because it gives you a lot of time to just sit with this book and these characters and ponder. TLDR, I love this book, I love these characters, I love this writer, I love phase 2 of the High Republic, and I'm so glad that we are starting off the chronology here because it feels like we are getting to step off on the right foot. If this is the first video you're viewing of this, you have come at the perfect time because there are only 2 other episodes out as of right now. Feel free to go back and find those on my page if you want to get caught up. And if you want to be here for the rest of the journey, we have a lot of stuff left to go through, so make sure you press follow. I kind of low-key decided today that I was going to add a bunch of the comics to my list, so stay tuned for that because our list just got a lot longer. I will be back as soon as I possibly can with the continuation of this series, but until then I post videos daily of other random Star Wars stuff. Thank you guys so much for being here, and as always, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye! Yoda came to me in a dream and told me that in the year 2026 I needed to go through all of Star Wars chronologically, so that's exactly what we're doing. Today I'm here to talk to you about the Battle of Jedha, the first audio drama chronologically in Star Wars, this one of course being from phase 2 of the High Republic. We are going to be discussing spoilers for this, so if you have not experienced the Battle of Jedha, I highly suggest saving this video and coming back when you're done because you do not want to be spoiled for this. To give those people a second, if you haven't seen me before, my name is Sunny, and in the year 2026 I am attempting to get through as much as the Star Wars chronology as I physically can, including all of the movies, series, both live action and animated, some of the games, most of the comics, all of the books. If that is something that you're interested in viewing, why don't you press follow because I will be doing it all year long. Okay, hopefully if you're still here, you have listened to this book, and now we can discuss. The reason I say listened is because this book, if you open it physically, is a script, and I do not suggest experiencing it that way. It's the same way I wouldn't suggest reading the script of a play that you haven't seen in person before. Reading this versus listening to it are completely different vibes, and especially if you are unfamiliar with the audio drama format, I think you are doing yourself a disservice if you are just reading this book and not listening to it. This drama follows a plethora of characters, but mainly Jedi Master Creighton's son and Jedi Knight Ada Forte, along with Jedi Master Slandra Show and a couple other random Jedi. We also meet a Jesta guy named Keth. So where we start on this book, we are on Jedha, obviously, and there are 2 huge things happening. One, we are preparing for a big celebration on the planet called the Festival of Balance. Some of the Jedi that we meet in the story are making a pilgrimage to experience that festival. We are also experiencing the end of the war between Irem and Arano, which we got a lot of in the previous book. Delegations from both planets have met on Jedha to sign the official peace treaty. We already have Ziri and Fontu married, but they need to officially broker peace through this signing, and that is what we are on Jedha to do as kind of like a neutral ground. Also on Jedha, we are introduced to what I think was called the convocation. My brain keeps wanting to call it the conclave, but I don't think that's right. It is representatives from each of the Force following groups, the Jedi being one of them, the Guardian of the Wills are one of them. Of course, the Path of the Open Hand has been trying to get a representative representative on this board, so to speak, and they got one on there. I believe it was last book, if not the book before that. So there are path members walking around. They're members of literally every other force group walking around Jedha. Tensions are really high. It's just the recipe for disaster, and that is literally exactly what happened. There is some meddling going on. There are several attempts to stop the peace treaty between Irem and Arano from being signed, and that eventually comes true. They start fighting again, a riot breaks out, Jedha erupts into chaos. The back part of this book entirely is just the riot and the fallout of not only these peace talks, but also all of these force users, force devotees, getting into it in the streets of Jedha. And leading up to the battle, we learn that the meddling going on is mostly due to the Path of the Open Hand. We see the mother kind of plotting against like literally everybody, but specifically the Jedi, as she is slowly putting her plan into motion, and it leaves off with her releasing the leveler into the streets during the riot, and of course that doesn't go well, and then they just kind of scoot. When I read this book for the first time last year, I was obsessed with it. It was one of my top reads of last year, and I put reads in quotations because it is a listen. And going back and listening to it again, I don't think I had quite as good of an experience, but that is by no way saying that this book is bad. I would still probably say that this is an A-tier read for me. It's probably just below the other A-tiers we have so far. The reason that I feel like I didn't love it as much this time is because I felt like the plot was moving just a little bit too quickly. And that is generally my complaint with all of the audio dramas. But overall, like I said, this is still an A-tier experience for me. I love the plot of this so deeply, and I think that this is such a cool meeting of all of the different characters we've been following around so far. If you have listened to Battle of Jedha, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Our next thing on this chronological journey is going to be a pair of trade paperbacks, which I'm going to review together because it's just issues 1 through I think 12 of the same comic series. So if you want to be here for that and for all of the other videos in this chronological quest, make sure you press follow, and as always, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye! In the year 2026, I'm going through as much of the Star Wars chronology as I possibly can because Yoda famously said, "Do or do not, there is no try." I'm here pretty recently after my last post from this series to talk to you about 2 volumes of a comic series called The High Republic: Balance of the Force. This comic series was introduced in 2022. It's written by Cavan, who has written a plethora of Star Wars things, including a lot for the High Republic. And I decided to read these 2 and review them as a chunk because I feel like it wouldn't have really done it justice if I would have stopped after the end of Volume 1. So of course, we've got to talk about Volume 1 and 2 together. And this is the perfect time to give you a spoiler warning. If you want to read this without spoilers, or at the very least without my thoughts in your head, feel free to save this video and come back when you're done. I do not want to spoil this for you. The first couple issues of this deal with pre-Battle of Jedha, the audio drama stuff, and I was getting really concerned that I read these out of order, but after getting past issue 4, it kind of moves past where Battle of Jedha ended, or at least like it moved past it enough for me to justify reading this after Battle of Jedha. If you're going on the same journey and you have not made it here and you want to go entirely in chronological order, the first, I think, 3 issues of this are before the audio drama, and the rest can be after or simultaneously. What I think might be a reoccurring theme when I'm talking about these comics is a very, very vague, brief overview. I really don't want to give you a full plot rundown of this. It would just be me dictating a full comic to you, and I feel like that's not fun for anyone. So to give you a very, very brief TLDR, these 2 volumes follow Jedi Knight Vildar Mac, and then a Padawan that he meets on Jedha named Maddie. There are a couple other Jedi that come in and out, notably one named Olivia, but spelled Oliviah, which kind of took me out immediately. We also meet a little scoundrel guy named Tay, who is like a purple elf learn throughout the comic, I think pretty early on actually, we learn that he is a former guardian of the Wills, but is no longer with them for a variety of reasons. We are mainly following, though, Vildarmak, who has some demons of his own that he's dealing with. He and Maddie team up and are almost immediately thrown into the midst of the Battle of Jedha. We don't really have a lot of time with them pre that. Like I said, this is 10 issues of a comic, and only the first 3 are not dealing with the battle. So for a lot of this, they are fighting or being chased or something along those lines. This series follows all of those characters as they get caught up in the battle and the surrounding conflicts that don't necessarily have to do with the titular battle, but they're also not helping the situation. We get to see Yana in here, we get to see the Herald in here, which were both really, really cool to see. This is really filling in the gap between Battle of Jedha, and I think the next time we really get a good look at them is going to be Path of Vengeance, though there is a book in between. And of course, we get some really, really cool shots of the Leveler in here, because if you remember from Battle of Jedha, the Leveler just gets released out onto the streets and is going nuts. You can imagine with all of these Force users in one confined area. And I have to say, when I was reading this, I wasn't expecting it to be super consequential because I have read all of these books before and didn't feel like anything was super missing from them. And I will kind of go back on that because I think that while you don't necessarily miss anything by not having read these comics, I do think they're really fun, and you do get to see some scenes of consequence, if that makes any sense. For example, this is a spoiler, so be warned. Towards the end of this run, we get to see the Herald get his hands on the Rod of Daybreak, which is something that the Path of the Open Hand has been searching for since the start of Phase 2. So it's little things like that where it's filling in gaps that we kind of already had the answer to from the books, but this is just like a visual aid, a reinforcement of those ideas and narratives. And while I didn't really find myself caring about any of the B plots to this story, specifically the side plot with Olivia, I super didn't really care about. I found myself getting really attached to all of these characters individually, and then eventually them as one big unit. But I think all of these characters are really, really intriguing and are suited for specifically the comic medium so perfect. So overall, I had a pretty good time with this comic series. It did drag in a lot of places for me. Like I said, I wasn't super attached to this narrative, even though it was done really well. It just wasn't really something that I was looking to read in the moment. And that is kind of the curse of doing these challenges where you're doing things in a certain order and you're on a timeline. I don't really have the luxury of waiting until I'm in a certain mood to be able to read something. And today, as it so happened, I was not really in the mood to go through 10 comics, but I did it anyways. And as a result of that, I don't think I was as invested as I would have been if I was in like peak comics horse blinder mode. But even with that being said, I did enjoy this comic book. I think that I will enjoy it even more when I sit down and read it for a second time, once I have even a morsel of brain power left to my name. I think for right now I'm going to land it in the B tier. I am on my own time going to go back and read this when I am in a comics mood because I want to give it a fair shot. I liked the artwork. I think that the plot was fine. I do like the plot of Battle of Jedha, and this is basically the same thing just with different characters and some side missions. Was it my favorite thing ever? No. Did I like it more than most of the books we've read so far? Also no. Did I like it better than the Porter comic? Also no. So I think for right now this is going to go into B tier and it'll be our first thing in B. But as always, I hold the right to change that, should the will suit me. For this challenge, I will not be reading any of the Dark Horse comics, which chronologically would be the next couple of things we would be reading. So instead, we are going to jump into a long line of books, the next of which being Cataclysm. If you want to follow along on this chronological Star Wars journey, make sure you press follow. I would love to see you around here. And as always, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye. I'm in my 10th era, and that's why in 2026 I'm going through every single one of the Star Wars canon projects, including all the movies, all the TV shows, the games, the books, the comics, anything I can get my little mitts on, we are going to attempt. not attempt, we are going to do this year. I come before you today to talk about Quest for Planet X, the second middle grades book in the High Republic Phase 2, which of course chronologically comes before Phase 1. This book is by Tessa, one of my all-time favorite Star Wars authors. I am going to be open and transparent here. I did read this and Catalyst in the wrong order. The website that I was toying with using, which is an incredible resource, I think it's SW Timeline, had this before Catalyst. And I wasn't really paying attention when I started reading. Honestly, I really wanted to get to Catalyst, so I just read it. And then I remembered, hey, this is definitely before. I am saying that both from my experience having read these books before and according to the official timeline in the back of Tales of Enlightenment, which we'll get to in a couple videos. Quest for Planet X comes before Catalyst. So for the High Republic, I always say when in doubt, jump to reading them in release order in each phase, because this came out before Catalyst came out, so I definitely should have been checking that. But nevertheless, I'm posting them in the correct order. I just wanted you to know that as you go through and watch these, I filmed the video you'll see next like a week ago. Anyways, let's talk about Quest for Planet X, because I actually really enjoyed this book, and this is your official spoiler warning if you haven't read this yet, and I highly suggest you do if you are trying to experience all the High Republic has to offer. Save this video and come back when you're done. I don't want to spoil this for you. I will say, not a ton of consequence happens in this book. But with that being said, I think that this is a really fun story, and I think I might like it more than the other middle grades book we got in Phase 2. If you'll remember, I did like that one a lot more than I did when I read it for the first time reading it for this. There's still like 3.0, 3.25-ish books for me, which I think is a perfectly average read, especially considering that I am not the target audience for this book. To give you a brief rundown of the plot, we are back with Padawan Rupert Natani, who is Solandra Show's Padawan, and she is with her friend Doss on Batuu, and we also, this is Doss, and then we meet a character named Sky, who is a Graf. These three get roped into competing in the Graf Santeca hyperspace lane ultimate challenge. I don't remember what the actual thing is called. Hyperspace Chase is what they're calling it. But it is basically a competition being put on by the Santecas and Grafs to get people to go discover more hyperlanes for them. Doss and Sky both really want to compete in this for separate reasons and end up roping Rupert into it, who doesn't really want to go but ends up going because she is friends with Doss at the very least. And then over the course of this book, they run into Fairies, who you may remember from Path of Deceit. They are, I think the race was called Kestrian. They're the parent of the hatchlings that Marta is helping with at the very beginning of that book. And he was sent to go tamper with communication buoys and like take them over. And through this book, they're also like fixing some of the buoys, and they take Fairies and ultimately get him to leave the path. We see them help Fairies leave the path after he kind of comes to the realization that the mother is not there to help him or his family. She doesn't really care about them. They, I think, end up on Batuu. I don't really remember where this book ends with them, but they started on Batuu, and I'm pretty sure they also end on Batuu. I think for what this book is, being a middle grades book that's not supposed to be of heavy consequence to the rest of the series, I think it's really fun. It is a little bit of a diversion from the main plot, but we do get to see some characters from the other non-middle grades books, which is always, I think, a fun inclusion when they get to be in a less tense situation through these middle grades. Like I said in my other review, I really do like Rupert. I think she's a really fun character, and her and Solandra together I think are really fun. I don't really care for the other two teens in this book. They were just kind of wishy-washy to me. I am usually not a big fan of the like, I'll do what I want, Dad kind of teenager trope, and that is definitely what we're getting from Sky, and a little bit of Doss too, though Doss is a little bit more of a pushover. Overall, this book is really cute. I think that this writing wasn't overly simplistic. You could definitely tell that it is for a younger audience. I fully believe that if you are skipping over the middle grades books, you have not experienced the entirety of the High Republic. While some of them are not integral to the plot, you are missing context because some of this stuff will pop up later. When you skip books like this without giving them a chance, you have no idea if you're actually going to like the story or not. It's so small. I was able to read this and Path of Vengeance in the same day. So I think that fully, if you are reading all of the High Republic, you should be reading the middle grades books. But getting down from my soapbox, I would love to hear your thoughts if you have read Quest for Planet X, and if you are interested in following along for the rest of this chronological journey. We have a lot of really fun stuff coming up, and by a lot I mean like 400 rows on a spreadsheet, a lot. So we have a year's worth of content to go. Definitely press follow if you're interested in joining me on this journey. Thank you so much for being here, and as always, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye! I just finished reading Cataclysm by Lydia Kang, and we absolutely need to talk about it. But before that, I have a little disclaimer to add to this video. With the TikTok thing going on, I guess TikTok Studio just straight up doesn't work anymore. And it took my 9-minute video and condensed it down to the first minute, and then refused to let me export the full video. So we are trying to capture the same magic. After that amount of time, I cannot tell you anything that I said in that video, so I'm going to recount to the best of my ability. I did also want to make that disclaimer in case I get any little details wrong. Consider this to be your official spoiler warning if you have not read anything in the High Republic, or specifically in the High Republic Phase 2, I would suggest not watching this video any further. Maybe save it for later and come back when you're done. I would love to hear your thoughts, but I do not want to spoil this book for you because, spoiler for my review, it's really good and you should read it. I'm gonna say straight off the bat, this is an S tier book for me. I adored this. I really love this plotline in general. It's probably my favorite out of the ones that we get in the High Republic. The way that this book wraps up the plot from Convergence fits so well into the narrative, and it also sets the reader up really nicely to go on to Path of Vengeance. So this book picks up with the gang from Convergence. Gela, who's a Jedi Knight who just recently became a Wayseeker. We've also got Axel Greylark, who is currently in jail for the things that he did in Convergence. And then we've also got Princess Siri and Prince Fontu of Irino and Irem, respectively. When this book picks up, we are kind of dealing with the fallout of the Battle of Jedha and the situation that occurred there with the peace deal between Irem and Irino not having been signed. We are trying to figure out at the start of this book, one, if there was any outside forces maybe conspiring against these two planets. Spoilers, there is. And whether or not one of those conspirators happens to be Irem or Irino. Spoilers, it's not. For a good chunk of this book, we are split up with these two situations, one of which being about Axel and the Path of the Open Hand and the Mother and Gela, and then the other of which being about the two planets trying to sign this peace treaty. That's all I'm going to say about the plot, just in case someone didn't heed my spoiler warning. Except for, there is a part of this book that had me genuinely sobbing, and I really wish I had the footage from when I first recorded this, because I had like mascara running down my face. I had been crying so much. There's a point at the end of this book where Axel finally decides to betray the Mother and the Path and stick up for himself, and it goes horribly for him, and he and Gela end up trapped in this like mud pit thing, and they get trapped under a bunch of rubble. And there's a point in this book where Yaddle and Yoda, working together, lift the rubble off of this like sinkhole mud pit thing, and the way that it is written is so beautiful. Any description I can give here will not be doing it justice. Having Yaddle in here and her getting some actual character moments is such a treat. Yaddle is unironically one of my favorite Jedi. I love her so dearly, along with Yoda, who was in this book but a lot less. Yaddle's walking around with this like baby Padawan, and she's like kind of annoying but also kind of cute, and Yaddle is so fed up and done with her the entire time. Like I said at the beginning of this video, this book is definitely a top tier read for me. It is going to go along with Convergence at the very top of my tier list for Phase 2, and probably also for just all of Star Wars. I love this book. We only have 2 more books to get through in the High Republic Phase 2. I can't believe that we've been able to get through this in just about a month. That is giving some lukewarm signs for the rest of the year as we go through the next 400-ish things on my spreadsheet. Don't remember if I said this at the top or not, but if not, I am attempting to go through every single thing in the Star Wars chronology that I can get my hands on. If you want to follow along for that journey, I would love to have you here. Make sure you press the follow button. And I don't say this, I don't think ever, but if you liked this video, specifically if you're watching it on Instagram, maybe press the share button. I make videos almost exclusively that are above 3 minutes long, so Instagram will not push them out to new people. So if you think that this video is worth viewing, I would be very indebted to you if you pressed the little reshare button at the bottom. I will be back very soon to share my thoughts on Path of Vengeance. But for now, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye. Do or do not, there is no try, and that's why in 2026 I am going through the entirety of the Star Wars canon chronology, meaning all the books, all the movies, all the comics, all the games, everything that I can get my grubby little mitts on, we are attempting to read / experience in the year 2026. Is that physically possible? I don't know, but we are going to do it to the best of our ability. I humbly come before you today to present Path of Vengeance by Cavan, the final novel in Phase 2 of the High Republic. Consider this your official spoiler warning if you have not experienced the High Republic. We are going to be talking about not only the plot for this book, but the plot for Phase 2, and maybe also the plot for at least Phase 1, so definitely save this video and come back when you're done if you have not experienced this. I do not want to spoil it for you. This book was so much longer than I remember it being. I honestly think this is longer than both of the adult novels, which is kind of nuts. Let me get the good stuff out of the way first. Can we talk about how beautiful this cover is? The cover for Path of Vengeance and Path of Deceit are some of my absolute favorite cover arts in Star Wars. I have no idea who the artist for this was, but they absolutely ate with this cover. It is so gorgeous. With that being said, I don't like this book. I feel like entirely it could have been cut in half and we would have gotten to the same point a lot quicker. I also feel like there was a lot of crude humor in this book that was really unexpected for how dark it turns. And overall, I didn't care for how much it was recapping other stuff that had already happened. In this book, we reconvene with the path after the Battle of Jedha. We are kind of jumping back in the timeline a little bit. What I noticed about the first third of this book is that it is basically recounting the plots of Battle of Jedha and then Battle for the Force, I think is what it's called. The High Republic 2022 comics, those 2 trade paperbacks that we read a couple of days ago. The entire plot is in the first half of this book. And if I am speaking my truth, I think that was entirely unnecessary. The point, in my opinion, for this multimedia project is to get people to experience all of the different mediums. So I think that if someone had chosen not to read the comics or not to listen to the audio drama, they can just miss that part of the plot. That being said, I do love that we got to see Tay and Maddie and the other guy whose name I can't remember, Vildar Mac, I think is the name of it. They all show up in here. Maddie is actually really important to the plot. I wish that they had decided against recapping the entirety of that comic. I cannot stress enough how, in its entirety, that comic comes into play in this book. And I would have just preferred if they had given the TLDR, these are the people, this is what happened, instead of going through and telling me the whole situation again. It just felt a little bit like either they didn't trust people to go read the comics or they didn't trust the comics to be standing up by itself. That is such a huge pet peeve of mine with specifically Star Wars, when we have to go back and continuously remind people of what's going on and what's happened. To an extent, I understand because Star Wars has such a vast history, but with stuff like this that was designed specifically to be a multimedia project, why don't we let the multimedia be in the room with us? I also think that the middle part of this book, where we are with Sunshine Dobbs and Marta and a couple other characters on Planet X, was a little bit lackluster. It was ultimately fine, but I couldn't get myself really to care. I know that I am being a little bit harsh on this, but after liking the rest of the High Republic Phase 2 so much, I forgot how much I disliked the ending of it. All of that being said though, the last third of this book generously is really good, which is why the first time I read it, I think I gave this book a 3-star instead of what I probably would have given it without that back half, which would have been like a 1 point something or a generously a 2. The back half of this book is a huge fight, and it is written really, really well. What I love Cavan Scott's writing for, specifically in books, is how well he writes scenes of tension, and specifically like fight scenes or battle scenes. I think they are really, really, really well done. And I think that's because Cavan Scott has a background in comic writing, and that is personally where I prefer his writing. I think that all of his comics are so fun, and I always look forward to reading his comics. As for this though, it just kind of fell flat for me. I'm not sure if any of that was coherent, but rant aside, I think that this book is fine, but it is a little bit of a letdown after liking the rest of Phase 2 so much. I wish that there was a book after this, if I'm being completely honest. One more Iram and Arano book would be really, really cool, but alas, that is not the case. This book for me, I think, is going to be in D tier, if I'm being honest. We don't have anything in D yet, so I feel kind of bad putting it down there. I do reserve the right, as always, to change that later on. It's either going to be a low C or a D for me, and I'm leaning towards D because of just how much I really did not care for the first 2/3 of this. I would love to hear your thoughts on this book. If you've read it, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear if you felt the same way about this. I'm so excited to be moving on because our next book is Tales of Enlightenment, a super short little short story / behind the scenes book. And then after that, we are moving on to Young Jedi Adventures. Unironically, one of my favorite animated projects in Star Wars. So if you want to follow along for the rest of the Star Wars chronological journey, make sure you press the follow button. Thank you so much for being here, and as always, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye. In the year 2026, I'm going through the entirety of the Star Wars chronology because Yoda famously said, "Do or do not, there is no try." Today, I'm here to talk to you about the final installment in the Phase 2 of the High Republic, and that, of course, is Tales of Enlightenment, the short story collection / interview booklet by George Mann. And straight up, I'm not going to give a spoiler warning here. We are not going to be talking about any of the short stories in this book. I will explain more in a second, but I want to start off and say that I love just the physical form of this book. It's massive. It is more of like a children's picture book size than anything else. It is a super short experience. The reason that I am not going to talk about any of the short stories is because I do not feel like they add a lot to the High Republic as a whole. They have basically nothing to do with the plot of anything else in Phase 2. What this is giving you is context about the bar enlightenment that we first see in the Battle of Jedha and is brought up a couple other times. Every single one of these stories follows Keth, who we also met in Battle of Jedha, and some of the other companions that frequent the bar, and we just get 1 to 4 page stories, not including a title page, about something they're up to on any given day. I did not have a strong affinity towards anyone in particular. I thought they were all just fine, and after the second one, I honestly kind of felt like they started blending together. After going through Path of Vengeance and getting that ultimate conclusion that's kind of menacing, going to this is like kind of anticlimactic. What I loved about this book though are all of the Star Wars insider type interviews in the back of this book. We get an interview with, I believe, all of the authors who had something to do with the High Republic Phase 2. This is my queen, Zoraida Córdova. I believe some of these were included in Star Wars Insider because when you are going through and reading the interview, the interviewer is credited in most of these as Star Wars Insider. It was just a really good time. There's some really fun pictures included in all of these interviews. Something else that I really appreciated towards the end of this book is that there is a full timeline that you can follow up to the end of the High Republic Phase 2, which includes everything from Phase 1 as well. And this is super helpful if you, like me, are trying to do a chronological read. And I'll be honest, that's all I have to say about this book. It is a super short read. I forget about it constantly, even though I own it and I look at it almost every single day. This for me is probably a C tier because I did not dislike anything in here, but it wasn't anything special. If you have any thoughts on it, I would love to hear them in the comments. If you want to come along for this journey as we go through the remaining 390 something cells on this Excel sheet, feel free to press the follow button. I would love to have you here. And as always, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.